built up your energy network during the Cold War to strengthen your economy and manage the environmental impact in Manhattan Project Energy Empire.
And today we'll be teaching you how to play Manhattan Project Energy Empire, game designed by Tom Jolly and Luke Laurie and published by Frostbite Games.
And hello everyone, it's Stella.
And Taryn from Meeple University.
And hey, if you enjoyed this video after watching, you really help us by like, subscribe and let us know what you think in the comments. That seriously will help us to bring more videos. Alright, now let's get to the classroom.
In Manhattan Project Energy Empire, players take on the roles of countries trying to build up their economies and their power networks after World War II. Players will use workers and energy to take actions on the main board, including gaining resources and building structures, and use those same workers and energies to activate their structures. They'll build and utilize power plants to generate that energy, as well as cause and manage pollution. The player's collective pollution will trigger global impacts, and once all global impacts are resolved, the player who scores the most points will be the winner. In this video, I'll begin by explaining the base game, followed by all of the multiplayer modules which come with the base box of the new Grail Games release. I won't take you step by step through setup, but I'll show you what the components look like once you're done. In the center of the table, you'll have the main board. The bottom half of the board is empty and contains all of the game's action spaces, broken into three groups: industry, commerce, and government. And below each set, you'll find the deck and market of the corresponding building types, with 3 cards face up in each market. If you're playing the 2-player game, you'll also place 1 neutral coloured worker disc on each of these 3 action spaces. They'll remain there for the entire game. In the top half of the board, you'll have the score track, the United Nations track, a market of 3 agenda cards, these are endgame scoring cards players can collect, and 3 early and 3 late game global impacts. Below each card is a stack of the double-sided pollution tokens, these have general pollution and nuclear pollution, and the size of each stack depends on your player count. Throughout the game, any time you're instructed to take a pollution token, you take it from the leftmost stack. Tokens are never returned to these stacks, they go back to the general supply if you ever discard them. It's the emptying of these stacks which determines the length of the game. In addition to the leftover pollution, make general supplies of all the other resources and components: plastic, oil wells, science, money, steel, and power plant dice, which come in 5 colours. Unlike pollution, all of these are simply gained or spent to their supplies. And do note, you may spot these maximum values for the different resources printed on these prototype player boards. That rule has been eliminated for the final version. You can hold as many of these resources as you wish. Give each player a player board with a starting pollution in the top left corner of this grid. This is from the general supply, not the main board. Each player takes 3 of their coloured workers and 2 of their coloured energy, setting the remainder of both aside. You'll be able to gain these other tokens through the game, but you need to make sure you keep them separate from the ones you already have. Each player gets 2 nation cards and 2 government agendas, and after looking at them, chooses to keep 1 of each. Gain starting resources shown at the top of your nation card. Choose a first player and give each other player coins based upon their position in turn order. You're now ready to play. Energy Empire is played in turns, starting from the first player and going clockwise round and round the table until the end of the game is reached. On your turn, you'll choose to take one of 2 types of turns, a work turn or a generate turn. On a work turn, you'll place 1 worker and any amount of energy onto one of the action spaces on the board to resolve that action. Then you may optionally spend any number of workers or energy to activate structures that you've previously built and which come from the same column as the action you took. On a generate turn, you retrieve all your workers from the board discard all your energy, use energy dice to generate new energy and possibly pollution, thus giving you the tokens you need to take more work turns. You can't take 2 generate turns in a row, and you can't take a work turn if you've run out of workers, but otherwise you have no restriction on your choice. So let's first look at a work turn. A work turn is broken into 2 steps, using a worker to activate a location on the board, which is mandatory, and then using workers or energy to activate structures, which is optional. First, place a worker. Take one of your worker markers and any number of energy markers from your supply, making them into a stack. Then place that stack onto one of the 13 action spaces, each of which shows this icon. The space may be occupied or unoccupied even by one of your own stacks. However, the stack you place must be strictly the tallest stack in that space when you place it. That means this 2-tile stack could be placed in any location except for this mining location, as it already has a 2-tile stack. If I needed to place there, I would need to add another energy and make it a 3-tile stack. You are allowed to place a stack which is taller than the minimum required to make it harder for other players to take that action later. You aren't allowed to choose an action if you're unable to take the action. For example, if this player had no science, that player could not choose that space. Each action you take requires the placement of an entirely new stack. This player couldn't, for example, simply make this 2-stack into a 4-stack to take the action again. It would have to place an entirely new stack of 4. And a stack must be composed of a single worker on top of any number of energy. Energy-only stacks or stacks with multiple workers in it are not allowed. If you're playing the 2-player game, those neutral workers you place during setup count as their own stacks, meaning those 3 action spaces require at least a 2-stack to take. Now I'll take you through the different actions. Many actions simply give you ways of gaining or exchanging resources. At mining, simply gain 1 steel. At scientific research, gain 1 science, and you may research 1 global impact. Choose and secretly look at any 1 unrevealed global impact card. At the finance action, you gain money. Choose how prosperous the economies are. You can choose to simply gain $2 for yourself, $3 for yourself, with all other players gaining 1, or $4 for yourself, with all other players gaining 2. There are 2 different ways to gain oil, to trade for it or drill for it. If you drill, you gain 3 oil and an oil well token. To take the action, you must be able to place your new oil well token onto an empty oil well space of your grid. If these are full, you can't take the action. With the oil trade action, you can either buy 3 oil for money or sell 3 oil for money. The price of oil depends on the state of the game and is based on the value showing in the leftmost box, which still has pollution tokens in it. So at the start of the game, oil is $1 for 3 oil, while by this stage the price would have gone up to 4. For whatever the current price is, you now spend that much to gain 3 more oil, or discard 3 oil to gain that much money. With the action, you may make only a single oil sale or a single oil purchase. The last resource is plastic, and there are 2 ways to gain that: general trade and chemistry. When you take the trade action, make any number of exchanges of plastic, science, coins, and steel for any other combination of those resources. The coins exchange at 2-to-1, all other resources at 1-to-1. If you choose chemistry, you must spend 1 oil barrel to gain 2 plastic, 1 science, and 1 pollution. This is the first of our actions which gives you pollution, so let's have a look at how that works. When you gain pollution, take the token from the leftmost stack which still has any pollution. There are 2 types of pollution, general and nuclear, and those are shown on opposite sides of the same token. For each one, you take a single token, flip it to the correct side, and add it to any empty space on your grid. Your grid is broken into 3 rows: air, land, and water. And for some actions, you're required to pollute a specific row. This would be nuclear pollution in your land row. But if it's not specified, you have free choice. If a row is completely full when you have to pollute it, then you instead pollute the row of your choice. And if your whole grid is full, you can still take the action. You gain no further pollution, but must still discard the appropriate amount of pollution from the track. Pollution is a means to an end. You can play with as much or as little pollution as you want, but every time you place pollution, you're going to cover up potential points. The points you can see here don't score right away. There'll be various moments through the game, which I'll explain as we go along, when environmental scoring will be triggered. And it's during these that you'll score your visible points. To reduce your pollution, you can take the cleanup action. This will cost you 1 science and allows you to clean up 2 pollution. Each cleanup lets you discard an oil well, or discard a regular pollution, or flip a nuclear pollution to its regular side. That means it takes 2 cleanup steps to remove 1 nuclear pollution entirely. As we saw in setup, you begin with 3 workers and 2 energy, and these next actions are how you gain access to the rest. Education gives you a new worker. Pay 3 coins to gain a pollution and a new worker. Take the new worker token from the supply and add it to your board, available to be used immediately. When you take the power plant action, you may buy a single power plant die, paying the cost shown at the top and taking the appropriate die type from the supply. If you purchase a hydro-geo power plant, you must immediately pollute 1 land space, and you're limited to a single such die at a time. But for all other types, you can have as many as the supply allows, up to a maximum of 5 total dice. You may freely discard 1 to make space for another, and each die you hold at the end of the game is worth 2 points. Nothing else happens immediately, but it's during your generate turns that you'll use these to create energy. The last type of action is to build a structure. Choose one of the 3 market spaces and then pay the cost printed above the structure you want to build. All types could be built with money, while each of the columns has its own special resource which will build its structures. Pay the cost, take the structure, sliding any remaining structures down to the right and flipping over a new one from the top of the deck, and add the new card to your tableau of structures. If it has a pollution cost in its top right corner, you must gain that pollution now, and it'll show some victory points in the top left, which you'll score at the end of the game. It's good to keep your structures in columns based on their types. For example, I'd place this one here because this informs how you activate your structures in the second part of your work turn. After taking any work turn, you may activate any number of your structures of the matching type, even one you just built this turn. So in this case, I placed in an industry, therefore I can activate industry structures. To activate a building with this icon, it must be empty, and you must place either a worker or an energy token onto it to activate it. Doing that would let me gain 1 steel. Activating a structure with this icon costs you 2 total discs, so 2 workers, 2 energy, or 1 of each. Doing that would gain me 2 steel. You can activate any, all, or none of your structures of the appropriate type on any given turn, but once it has tokens on it, that action slot is occupied and they won't come off until your next generate turn. On the other hand, a structure with this icon can be activated twice at a cost of 1 disc each, but on different turns. So here I'd take 1 government action on the main board and then activate the science lab once, gaining its rewards, and could do the same thing on a subsequent turn. You'll find that this will represent a shift in the pace of the game. Early on, when you don't have many workers or structures, most of your benefits will come from actions on the main board. Later on, when you have a lot of both, you may be gaining a lot of benefit from activating your tableau of structures more so than by getting benefits on the board. Each player also has their nation card, and this is activated in the same way. It has this icon, so after placing an action, you activate it with one disc. This counts as a wild type of building. That is, you can do this regardless of the type of action you activated on the board. Every nation card action works in the same way. It shows a combination of resources which you can give up to advance one step on the United Nations track. You'll score the points for your position at the end of the game. Multiple players may occupy the same space with the exception of the final space, which is single occupancy. The second type of turn is a generate turn. You must take this if you have no workers left, although you may take it on any turn other than one immediately after a previous generation. As the first step, check to see whether you have 2 or more energy or worker discs left in your supply. If you do, gain one of the face-up agenda cards, replacing it from the deck. Each agenda offers an endgame scoring objective. You can hold at most 5 and must discard down if you go above 5. And each card itself is limited to a maximum of 5 points. Next, retrieve all of your discs, that is, energy and workers from your cards and from the board. Return all workers to your player board and discard all energy, including any that was unspent. You now attempt to generate new energy. Take any or all of your power plant dice, and you may also spend up to 4 oil to gain 1 oil die each. These differ from your other power plant dice in that you'll roll them for this generation, but then return them to the supply. Roll the dice, and then gain 1 energy for each energy icon showing, up to a maximum of 10. Then check for pollution. Find the die which rolled the single highest number, and if it's a tie, then you get to pick. If it is a solar or hydro die, then it will show no pollution. Nothing happens to your grid, but you still discard a pollution from the track to keep the game advancing. If the highest number is on a coal or oil die, then you gain 1 pollution. And if the highest die is nuclear, gain a nuclear pollution. As you can see, this is a matter of probability. The higher energy yielding dice are more likely to yield the worse pollution. Return your power plant dice to your board and any oil dice back to the supply. When the last pollution token is removed from a space, complete the action which caused that to happen. This won't necessarily be the end of the active player's turn. A player's turn can be interrupted by this step. And then flip and resolve the next global impact card. The top left will show one of the 3 environmental rows, and all players now score the points that are visible in that row. This would be a 2-point score. The top right will show one of the 3 structure stacks, and you'll reset that market by discarding its 3 cards and drawing 3 new ones. Next, resolve the effect printed at the bottom of the card, or explained along the side. This will either be an immediate effect impacting all players, or it could be a passive effect which will be in play until the next global impact is flipped. Then continue play from where you were interrupted with the new oil price in effect. Once the final global impact card has been resolved, the end of the game is triggered. Finish the current turn and then each player gets 1 more turn, still with an oil price of 5, and any gained pollution coming from the general supply. Now count up your final scores. Each player gets points based on their position on the UN track, and whichever player has advanced the furthest scores an additional 3 points. If tied, those points are split, rounded down. Gain all the points printed on your structure cards, and 2 points for each of your energy dice. Remember, this will never include oil dice. You only get these temporarily when doing a generate turn. Score the objectives on all of your government agenda cards. Remember, you can have at most 5 and score at most 5 points per card. Finally, score your environment. Score all 3 rows in the usual way by adding up these points. And then for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th columns, if that column is completely empty, gain the 1, 2, or 3 points printed below. This environment would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 points. The player with the highest score wins, and if tied, most combined leftover resources, meaning plastic, science, steel, oil, and sets of $2, breaks the tie. What we've just gone through are the basic rules of Energy Empire, but in your base box you will also have several expansion modules. You can use these modules at your leisure in any combination, and I'll go through them now. First and simplest are the new cards, new global impacts, structures in all types and nations, which have the Cold War banner and can simply be shuffled into each deck. This notably includes some new structures which activate during your generation turn without having to place a token, rather than being activated in the usual way. The Megastructures module adds new and powerful megastructures to the game. Randomly lay out a number of these equal to 1 more than the player count during setup, returning the rest to the box. Each megastructure has one of the 3 general types, and when you go to build a structure from that market, you can instead choose to construct one of its megastructures. You must pay the structure's cost, this will be higher than a standard structure, and meet its prerequisites. To get the capital city, for example, you'd already have to have constructed 2 government structures and advanced with the UN twice. These still come with pollution, but they give you a higher number of points and some powerful effects. In fitting with the Cold War theme, you can use the Espionage module. In setup, each player gains a spy card in addition to their usual setup, and on any work turn, regardless of which type of action space you chose, you may activate your spy to activate an opponent's structure. The opponent's structure you choose must match the type of action you took on the board, and it must not already be occupied by the opponent's piece. You then put your own pieces on it, this will be in addition to the piece you placed on the spy, and resolve the effect. The opponent gains 1 coin from the general supply, but is now blocked out from being able to activate that building until you have your next generate turn. However, the biggest module which comes with the Cold War expansion is the Doomsday clock. Use the opposite side of the board, place the clock marker at 1 and shuffle the Cold War cards. There is now a 14th action space, and this works like any other. I'd now need to place a stack of 2 if I wanted to take the action. This action represents the Cold War arms race. You're going to be spending resources to try to build up your strength in case of an attack. When you take the action, pay the current cost. This begins the game at only 2 coins, but could get as high as 2 coins, 3 oil, and 2 nuclear pollution. After paying, advance the cost and draw 3 Cold War cards. Look at them secretly, choose 2 to keep and 1 to return to the bottom of the deck. Then place 1 card face up beside your board and the other face down. After this action, you can still activate structures, and you may choose any one of the 3 types of structures to activate. Cold War cards have numbers between 0 and 3 representing your proficiency in 3 areas: space race, military, and diplomacy. The face-up, face-down nature of the card you're playing represents true Cold War spying. That is, your enemies know some of your capabilities, but not all of them. The game end can now be triggered in one of 2 ways, either by the pollution track ending as usual, or by the Doomsday clock reaching 12. In both cases, you still finish the active turn and then have all players take one more turn. All players now reveal all of their Cold War cards. You score 1 point per card and then add up your scores in each column. The player with the highest score in each column gains points equal to the position of the Doomsday clock. Second place gains half those points rounded down. If there's a tie for first, both players gain half points, and if there's a tie for second, the tied players get nothing. You can make the UN part of the game more interactive by using the UN Envoy expansion. Cover the basic UN space with the Security Council tile, and lay out a number of UN scoring tiles equal to one more than your player count. Only use Doomsday tiles if you're playing with that module. With this module, when you gain influence with the UN, instead of advancing on a track, take one of the extra star markers and place it onto any empty space on one of these tiles. You'll get that card's points, or its points and rewards. There's also now an extra action space which lets you advance with the UN, and again, this behaves like any other action space. You choose whether you want to pay a steel, a plastic, or a science to advance with the UN, and then whichever one you chose determines which type of action you just took, and therefore which type of structure you're allowed to activate. Finally, the game comes with the Alternative Locations expansion. Each of the actions which is not market or power plant has its own double-sided tile. You can use these in any combination, and they will change slightly the rewards and benefits of the standard actions you're used to. And that's how to play Manhattan Project Energy Empire. We are using a prototype copy of the game, so the rules and components may not be final, and do check out the project page for the game. We'll put a link to that in the description below.
And thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, let us know what you think, and share this video if you enjoyed. And hopefully you have a good day. See you next time.